I think the most amazing miracle of the universe is that nature can turn food into a perfect baby. It can even turn fast food into beautiful babies. And even fake, ultra-processed foods that are promoted as healthy can turn into active children. The question is, how much difference does the type of food really make? Are kids just so resilient we don't need to stress about it? I got fascinated with an interview Sanjay Gupta did with oncologist Ng.
So I have been caring for patients with gastrointestinal malignancies at Dana-Farber for the past 20 years. And I would say in each consecutive year, my colleagues and I were seeing more and more young people coming in, no risk factors, no genetic syndrome, with stage 4 colorectal cancer.
Wow.
One thing she said stopped me in my tracks.
So what is going on?
It is really a mystery, and I think part of the issue may be that it could be early life factors that are actually at play. And if you think about it, somebody coming into your clinic with this diagnosis, if you ask them, what were you eating at age 6? It's really hard to remember.
I'm not aware of anyone more knowledgeable about the impact the food we ate in early life has on us than Dr. Federica Amati. She spoke at the Longevity Summit we organized for TED. We interviewed her there on a rooftop, and she said fascinating things, but I never found the time to edit it. Ooh. And she is among the very few who are both a great nutrition scientist.
We also know that diet and exercise have a huge impact on how women experience the menopause transition. So we just ran the world's largest trial on menopause and diet at Zoe, and we found that changing women's diet drastically reduces their symptoms.
And a great teacher.
So one of the next questions is about how we start talking to children about health and nutrition. Yeah. Children usually only want to eat what tastes good.
I disagree. I think kids are really interested in food. When we engage them in understanding that certain foods are really good for their energy, other foods are really great for making them strong and big, they really love that. And the way to talk to children about foods is we talk to them about everyday foods and sometimes foods. There's no good or bad. It's just about the frequency in which we consume these foods. And what I found works extremely well is actually engaging them with the story of the gut microbiome. So telling them about the gut bugs that live inside them and that we need to feed them. Honestly, it's amazing what you see. Kids get so involved. You tell them that they need rainbow colors to power their batteries, and kids are running around going, "Mommy, what can I eat that's pink? What can I eat that's green?" They love it. So make it fun, get them involved in cooking, and model the behavior you'd like your children to see. So making sure that we have a positive food environment with kids, that you're enjoying food with them, and that you're not negative about your body and yourself when you're enjoying food is so important. And by raising children in this way to understand that food is a source of joy and a source of energy and power, then they grow up thinking that food is their ally, and that's what we want.
She also teaches nutrition to medical students at Imperial College London. Stanford hosts a nutrition summit each year led by Christopher Gardner, and both Dr. Amati and I attended.
We believe that changing school food is the cause of our lifetime.
So we got up at the crack of dawn to talk before the conference, and this is that conversation.
Speaking of you having a popular YouTube channel and a book, and you teach nutrition.
I do, yeah.
And you do science.
Yeah.
Usually those things, I don't see 4 things like that in one person. But you're doing all those things. Are there other things you're doing too that I didn't count?
I have a clinical practice, so I work with
you see patients.
Yeah, I do, with a multidisciplinary team.
That's really important. I should have mentioned that.
Well, I think it's important because it's the team at Well-Founded Health, which is the clinical practice I practice with. It's how medicine should be done. Mm-hmm. So we have like a multidisciplinary team. We all work together. We all learn from each other, and we discuss patients live all the time.
Unfortunately, the camera on me did not autofocus for some reason, and we didn't pick up on that. So rather than subject you to my blurry face, I'll post an avatar like we do on Zoom when the camera's off. And so you don't get too bored, I'll keep changing my avatar, sometimes to people who look just like me and could pass as my doppelganger. You start your book with the first chapter being called The Golden Window of Opportunity.
Yes.
The first 1,000 days and early years.
The reason I'm so passionate about it is multiple reasons. One of them is that most people aren't aware, and I think that's a real issue. So the importance of that period of life between conception and second birthday is so critical for health. And I think when you think about it, it's like, well, yeah, obviously, all the organs are built. All of our systems are wired, right? You know, by the time a child is 3, their brain size is 80% of an adult. All of the organs, everything is done. Like the cells are ready. And so, and of course now gut microbiome science has shown us how critical that time period is for gut microbiome structure. So the way that your gut microbiome shapes in those first 2 years is very hard to change later. We can change, if you think of the gut microbiome as layered, you know, the innermost layer, which is the one that also gets removed the most every time you go to the loo, that can change with the food you eat. It's fairly flexible. We see changes within, you know, a couple of days. But when you go down there, the layers closest to the gut lining, and also just the cornerstone species that really act as the
fascinating,
the like predators of the ecosystem, they are set very early. And it's really hard to influence a big change later. And that's why when I know I work a lot with people who are trying to conceive or pregnant, postpartum, and there's this like narrative of, oh well, you know, if you don't want to, if you're scared of giving birth, just have a cesarean section. It's the same. It's not the same. And cesarean section, I had one for my second child. She was breech. They are medical, like miracles, because you save women's and babies' lives. So it's not about being anti-cesarean. And I respect obstetricians so much because they're so good at knowing, right, when something needs to happen. But it's like this idea that it's the same. It's not the same. And that's why now people are developing protocols for like vaginal swabbing to try and actually recreate. I was going to
ask about that. But it's not that effective, or
no,
it's only partially effective?
The science so far is that it's not as effective. And there are safety concerns. So some obstetricians won't do it because they're like, what if we, by mistake, just transfer a harmful pathogen? Yeah, exactly. And also, we understand the mechanism of vaginal birth, but it's not like...
my baby's calling.
So I turned my phone off of Do Not Disturb so that I would catch you when you arrived.
Oh, yeah.
And that's my wife's text tone.
Oh, is it?
And it's, oh, yeah, my baby's calling.
That is so sweet.
So I have all kinds of... I amuse myself with text tones like that. I hate to put her on Do Not Disturb, but this is important.
That's so sweet. Oh yeah, I'm gonna have to
my
change
baby's
mine.
Speaking of babies.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we were speaking of babies.
So the vaginal swabbing doesn't do the same thing as vaginal birth. And vaginal birth, we now think is actually, the vaginal microbiome is super important, but
sorry to interrupt, but why would you get a pathogen from vaginal swabbing that you wouldn't get from a vaginal birth?
Well, because when you think about how babies are born, they're coming from the uterus, obviously, down the birth canal in that direction. And so the way that they are exposed to the bacteria is different than if I go up from the external world and then back out. It's just a different pathway. So when you look at vaginal microbiome, the population of the vaginal microbiome completely changes in the 3rd trimester. It starts to become more of a reflection of the gut microbiome.
I've never heard any of this.
Yeah, so it kind of creates a blueprint for the inoculation of the sterile baby gut, right?
Wow.
So the way that the baby inhales, essentially, inhales and breathes in and smears with the vaginal microbiome is in a specific direction. But now we think also that it's not just the vaginal microbiome, it's also the gut microbiome from the back passage, because when babies are born, it all happens. It's a messy process, but it all happens together. And so it's a combination of the two things. Wow. And so it's hard to recreate that with the exposure on the skin, exposure through the nose, exposure through the mouth, and also the direction of the exposure. So where most of the microbes come from at what point. It's one of those things, nature's really clever, it's done a really good job. And it's hard for us to recreate it exactly. But I think there's still studies ongoing. People are doing it more and more. Wow. But there's this like real marked importance of children who are born by cesarean section have different health outcomes. They have more atopic dermatitis, they have more eczema, more asthma, but more allergies in general. And they have slightly different health outcomes. Now, what happens with feeding can sometimes close the gap between a natural delivery and a cesarean delivery, and that is breastfeeding. So breastfeeding tends to close that gap for children born by cesarean section. If they're breastfed exclusively for the beginning of their lives, their gut microbiome composition and their risk of obesity tends to then catch up with their vaginally delivered siblings or other children. But what is happening right now, especially in countries like the United Kingdom, America, South America, and the Middle East, is babies are born by cesarean section more than they are by vaginal delivery. And it's not for medical reasons. It is because, unfortunately, some doctors will push for cesarean section because it is more predictable, or because they're making money, and unfortunately there's that. And also, there's this other narrative which is incredibly damaging for the first 1,000 days, that formula milk is the same as breast milk. Now, again, formula milk saves baby lives. It's not about being anti-formula milk, but let's not lie to parents and tell them it's the same, because it isn't. And this is a topic which I've spoken about a lot, and it's a very difficult one, because women, especially, or mothers, have so much pressure already, and breastfeeding is really hard, especially your first child. I've been there. It's 8 hours a day. It's pain. It's like not being able. It's really hard work, and we as a society don't support mothers to make that our primary activity. Okay, especially in the first weeks, you know, it can take 8 hours a day, and you have to be prepared for that. And no one teaches us that, even at antenatal classes. No one says, by the way, prepare to sit with a baby nursing for 8 hours a day for the first few weeks, right?
That's crazy.
So now we have this population of children where the mothers aren't aware of the impact of their diet in pregnancy, because this is very...
I was going to ask about that, because the industrialization of the microbiome, as the Sonnenbergs call it.
I mean, great term.
Yeah, they go in with a wrecked microbiome from combination of antibiotics and the food they're eating and who knows what.
There's actually been a really interesting piece of research. There's two interesting groups, one in Sweden, one in the UK, two startups that have looked at maternal microbiome and newborn infant microbiomes. And there are children right now, babies, that have little or no bifidobacteria, which is one of the most protective strains, right? And what these groups have done is they've said, okay, well, who's breastfed and who's not? Because usually it's in breast milk. And they found that there are breastfed babies without bifidobacteria. Why? Because the mothers have none.
Oh, brother.
So bifidobacteria in breast milk, it translocates from maternal gut. So you have to have it to make it for your baby. And so now there's this whole new area where it's like, actually, mothers that don't know, they don't have bifido in their their breast milk microbiome. Did you know that when we did the human microbiome project, so, you know, it's like the human genome project, but you know that breast milk no one sequenced it?
No, I didn't know that.
No one sequenced it, didn't think to do that. So there's a startup in the UK that is called BB Biome, actually, and they have. And there are children, there are babies who are breastfed, but they're not exposed to bifido infantis because their mothers don't have it. We have mothers who aren't given information, education, or the tools to really nourish themselves during pregnancy. There's a lot of misconceptions about how pregnancy nutrition works. A lot of people say, oh, don't worry, like the first trimester doesn't matter because there's no placental connection, so actually you're okay. That's not how it works. There are glands in the uterus, and growth factors and proteins and different types of nutrients are secreted from the uterus to the developing embryo. So like it doesn't matter what you don't eat. And the egg quality is set 90 days prior to conception, and one of the big influencing factors is diet. So diet is important throughout the whole process. And now with Prospect, which is how we came to this, like what the group that are doing the Prospect research are seeing is that women who have certain dietary patterns in pregnancy, high in processed red meat, sugar sweetened beverages, very refined carbohydrates, so like a high consumption of pastries, cookies, cakes, their children have a higher risk of lots of things. By the way, I did a review on this, but they also have a higher risk of early colorectal cancer. So there's this potential link with maternal nutrition and the offspring's risk. And again, that's if you're listening to this and that you're a mother like me, it's like, oh my God, this is terrifying. But it makes me angry that we don't have the public health tools in place and the policy in place to protect this, to make this a huge priority. So the reason I'm so passionate about the first 1,000 days is that you have this magical opportunity, what's called in the research the golden window of opportunity, to improve the life of the mother and the offspring, sometimes several, for life, like for both of them, for the whole, everyone gets involved. And so when it comes to like public health interventions, and I did my master's in nutrition at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, so that big focus is on low-income countries and middle-income countries. And there's a reason why so many public health interventions in low middle-income countries are aimed at antenatal care and early life. Wow. It's because you have a massive impact for long-term health. So I think we as a society need to consider this more seriously and really provide support and guidance and access to the best possible conditions for all families, all babies, all children. And that's not to say, of course, that childhood, adolescence, there's, as you know from my book, there are different windows of opportunity throughout the life course. But this is such a neat package to make a big difference. And so now it's really interesting to see that there's more research, like all the time, looking at maternal exposures and early life exposures and long-term health outcomes. And colorectal cancer is it's a real focus for early colorectal cancer at the moment.
But it's hard research to do, right? I mean, it's got to be epidemiology. You can't really do randomized control trials. And
it's not very ethical, right? And this is another thing. People are often like, well, there's not enough RCTs to show that. It's like, well, it would be really unethical to take a group. From what we know, no one would sign off the ethics to say intervention, like a 10-year intervention trial where this group gets given red meat and this one doesn't. No one could do it.
I think it's an interesting talking point because I come from environmental epidemiology.
Yeah,
so
mercury,
lead, asbestos, smoking, you name it. Those companies always say in court, they're always saying PFAS chemicals. They're always saying, show me the randomized control trials. You can't infer cause from large observational data. Yeah, baloney, we do it all the time. I mean, how do you think we know about trans fats and things like that?
You can't do that. Like, so the PFAS and the BPA is a really good example where you're like, well, it's hard to know, right? It's like, no, it's very clear to know. And no one's going to run that trial where you like purposefully expose people to these.
And I'm very familiar with that epidemiology from PFAS that caused the big lawsuit to be settled with DuPont. It was 7 years, 70,000 people. That's a short time when you're talking about incubation of kidney cancers and so on. And they didn't have the quality of the database that Harvard has. They didn't have all the food records and things like that. They had to go by concentrations in the blood. Michelle and I interviewed Brenda Eskenazi. She took 800 pregnant women who just become pregnant and has followed them into the adulthood of those children, so 25 years. Cool. But her focus was on pesticides because they're in the Central Valley, and her control group was in another area. Those pesticides, they predisposed them to diabetes, and they lowered their performance in school. At least if you can infer that from 800 people, and I think it's a really well done study. So
that's amazing, isn't it?
We need to do that for diet and microbiome and everything for pregnant women
and early child. But I think we have a natural experiment on our hands right now because we have a population of children under the age of 5 in the UK that have been raised on very high levels of processed foods. Very high levels, like 72% of their intake, of their dietary intake, right? And so this is the like pouchy, like meals in a pouch.
These things didn't even exist 20 years ago. And now they're one of the main ways that people feed their babies, but there'd been very little public scrutiny in that time.
So we have this natural experiment on our hands right now, where we have a large cohort of children in the country that has the lowest breastfeeding rate in the world, the UK. So therefore the highest portion of the population that have been raised on formula milk, and then these highly processed pouches, and then the snacks that come with those. So like there's sort of melty puffs and wafers. None of them are considered food. They're sort of very much processed ingredients. We're now seeing like what happens when this is their diet up until the age of about 3 or 4. Then most children in the UK will enter the school system, and the school food in the UK is nothing to be proud of. But they'll get exposure to some whole foods, basically. So there's huge outrage right now in the UK because the way that these food products have been allowed to proliferate and to just grow there's a loophole in the way that they're allowed to be marketed. So they're allowed to make claims about being a whole meal, balanced meal for your baby, because it's a new category. And so a lot of parents are buying these products, and I've worked with some of these parents one-on-one, with the belief that they're created to be healthy for their babies. And it's heartbreaking. When then there was a big expose that was done where independent scientists ran tests on these foods, and they don't have the micronutrient composition that they claim to have in front of the pack.
What about fiber?
They have basically no fiber. They're like super low in diversity of foods. They're low in essential nutrients like iron. So like terrible. And there are families that have been feeding their children these foods as the primary source of their food. And then combine that with the fun fact that children's diets in the UK, 20% of their protein comes from processed meat. Sausages are served, bacon and ham are served at schools. In the same way that we can see how like the population who grew up with less food, there is this cohort of children that is growing up now that is essentially a natural experiment, because we don't know what's going to happen with their gut microbiomes. So it's interesting, it's exciting to see that more people are sequencing children's gut microbiomes now. We don't know what's going to happen with their long-term health risks, cancers, but also
I think we have
metabolic
some early
health.
indicators, right?
Yeah, well, we have.
Aggressive early cancers.
Yeah.
I have some more things to ask you about.
Yes.
In your book,
Yes.
you list red meat and sugar repeatedly as the two things to minimize, to avoid. How do you rank those, red meat and sugar? What's worse?
So I think it depends what outcome you're looking at. When we think about cancers, red meat is worse. So especially colorectal cancer, which I have a personal interest in because my dad died of colorectal cancer. No. So like I'm more aware of that. But they're both bad for you. And I think with sugar, we need to be careful with sugar because sugar and sugar-sweetened beverages and sugar added to foods, and it's usually processed foods, right? So it's not the sugar that your grandma is adding to the tomato sauce she's making. But we know how terrible, especially sugar-sweetened beverages are for health, when it comes to metabolic health. So I would say like they sit next to each other in terms of their impact on health, that if you're looking at type 2 diabetes and obesity, sugar-sweetened beverages just trump red meat. But when we think about cancers, red meat has a more carcinogenic effect.
And heart disease? And
heart disease, yeah, of course, because of the saturated fat content. So if we take all the biggest killers in the world, they're sort of touched in slightly different ways by those two. And then if you combine them, as in your sort of burger and a cola situation, you're just giving your body such a challenge to, and it's, the components of each of those. I mean, I think sugar is a simpler mechanism. Like we know why consuming a high amount of sugar-sweetened beverages just challenges your pancreas in such a way that eventually it just becomes exhausted. And so your metabolism is disrupted in a very obvious way. But I think red meat is interesting because it has so many pathways in which it's harmful.
Liver fat.
So there's liver fat, there's the heme iron, which is actually pro-inflammatory and carcinogenic itself. And it's, for me, it's interesting hearing, you need heme iron and it's more superior and you absorb it better. It's like, sure, the bioavailability is higher. And if you have someone who is really struggling with their iron levels, sure, eating a bit of red meat might help.
Or something,
yes. But fundamentally, over-indexing on heme iron is directly harmful in itself because heme iron itself is pro-inflammatory and carcinogenic. So that's important. And then the metabolites of meat and how we cook meat. There's 4 mechanisms really with red meat when you think top level. There's the saturated fat, the heme iron, the way that we metabolize it. And I think the one that has the most research and people are most familiar with is TMAO and how that influences our health. And then there's how we cook meat creates these chemicals that are harmful. So they themselves are carcinogenic. So in a way, it's like red meat is more complexly harmful.
Yeah, more complexly harmful. So I don't know if you saw this paper in Nature Medicine.
One of my favorite papers.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite papers of all time. Yeah. And I love these heat maps.
Yeah.
For the audience, we should say that it's like 130,000 people from the Nurses' Health Study and Health Professional Study over 30 years.
Over 30 years, yeah.
They were asking what is the likelihood of eating these foods to reach 70 without a chronic disease.
Yes.
And only 10% of them, they're all medical workers, only 10% of them made it to 70 without a chronic disease.
That's right.
My wife just had her, I don't know what, 55th high school reunion.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. So everybody was over 70. 33% of them are gone. They've died already. And they're in Utah. They don't smoke and they don't drink. They're Mormons, you know.
Wow.
30% of them.
What I love about this study is that they really looked at health with lots of different lenses.
Yeah.
So they looked at several dimensions of what it means to be healthy. They identified like mental well-being, emotional well-being, psychological. I was like, this is so cool.
So
and
good.
they also looked at dietary patterns in lots of ways, and individual foods in lots of ways.
Yeah.
The cohort is so good, big, long-term, amazing to have that. But also the analysis is so elegant because they really try to understand in this study, like, is it the pattern? Is it the foods? Is it the food groups?
Yeah.
And I think that's, so for me, this is one of the best studies we have to date to understand the long-term health impact
me too.
of dietary patterns and
I
foods.
love this study. I keep coming back to it. I interviewed one of the epidemiologists
Oh,
from
amazing.
Harvard. But in the red zone,
Yeah.
this shocked me because I did not expect to see sugar-sweetened beverages here. Look what's all the way at the bottom, below sodium and only ahead of trans fat.
Yeah.
Meats,
Red and
red
processed
meat.
meat and processed meats. This kind of data where it's so obvious just how harmful eating these foods, having these foods in your diet as a regular part of your diet is directly contributing to this risk of death.
Yeah,
And
it's
of
crazy.
all the different illnesses, right? So, but yeah, it's crazy to see it like that. It's so much stronger.
And if that were just one paper, that would be one thing.
Yes.
But the Fodness papers...
Another fave.
Yeah, another fave of mine too. Lars Fodness. I made this graph from the graph that they had. I just simplified the number of lines and so on.
Nice.
But it was shocking because they have this paper in Nature about simple ways to increase your health span by 10 years in the UK, your country. 10 years.
Yes.
I think legumes were at the top and then
Legumes,
whole grains and nuts.
Yeah.
And then what was so interesting is if you reduce eating other things, you get somewhat equivalent gain in life expectancy.
Yeah.
And at the top were red meat, ahead of sugar-sweetened vegetable or sugar-sweetened drinks and whatever else that is.
Refined grains, right?
Refined grains, yeah. That to me is shocking.
There's a study where they looked at red meat consumption, unprocessed red meat consumption, and they treated it like a dose-response study.
Yeah.
And any amount is actually detrimental. Now, I think I work with a lot of people, and if someone says, oh, I really enjoy having a bit of red meat a couple of times a month, I'm like, listen, our bodies are resilient and we can adapt. And there are ways that you can eat red meat that is healthier for you. Like, we can work with that. So but being aware that it isn't a food that overall, it's not a health promoting food overall, right? And we have to be aware of that. And what I love about this chart here is it also points to organ meats, which are like having this moment.
Yeah.
So people are now eating more organ meats, which in this analysis are more harmful than French fries. Unprocessed red meat, organ meats, they don't have a magical health benefit.
Well, especially if you overdose on liver, right?
Exactly. Well, yes. There's lots of problems with that, not only from vitamin A, but also like the forever chemicals from our environment all accumulate in liver, in the organs. But the issue is that we need to help people understand that, of course, everything we do has an effect on our health. What I worry about is that people are turning to unprocessed red meats, organ meats, as a health-promoting food, not as something to be part of a healthy dietary pattern, right? And it's something that is growing in popularity. And my favorite question I get when we talk about these studies anyway, but they don't differentiate between the grass-fed, grass-finished.
Yeah, I know. I hear that all the time.
Meat. And I just say, but they don't differentiate between them. A, it's not how most people eat these meats. And B, there are some minor differences in the nutritional composition of the two, but they're not so big to reverse the trend.
Well, they talk about more omega-3s, but the bacteria in the rumen eat most of the omega-3s. So you go from almost zero omega-3s with grain-fed to almost zero omega-3s with...
Or like 0.01.
Yeah.
And so there's also this level of... I do think, like, from an animal welfare perspective, if you eat meat and you can afford a happier cow, please do that, right? But
I agree with that.
It still doesn't make it a food. It doesn't go from being bad for you to being really good for you. That's not how it works.
How long does it take for colorectal cancer to incubate?
Well, this is a really good question. So at Zoe, Professor Sarah Berry and Tim, they're leading two of the research arms, and it's really trying to understand why there is this huge increase of early onset colorectal cancer in under 50s. Yeah. And when we look at the work packages, so our colleagues in Trento, Nico Segata's team, they're looking at gut microbial signatures that are essentially precursor. They're like a red flag.
Fascinating.
Really fascinating. So they've, colleagues and them have identified these specific groups, these microbes that crop up in groups and in patients that then go on to have colorectal cancer. So what we're doing now is trying to understand, the next step is Professor Sarah Berry is going to run a trial with people who have this identified red flag. Can we change it with diet? So can we catch it early, intervene with dietary change and remove the flag?
So I really like the combination of scientist and clinician, like Tomiko is.
Yes.
Sean Spencer, we interviewed him. He's from the microbiome lab at Stanford. Same thing. And Sean said one of his problems is he likes to encourage people to bank their poop before they get sick.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Bank it at minus 80 degrees or whatever it is, so that you can do a fecal transplant, if you need to. And he said, but definitely do it before you go on a carnivore diet, because he has all these patients who tried a carnivore diet for 2 years, it didn't work out for them, and then their microbiome was so disrupted, they can't get back to eating a lot of the plants they used to eat.
Yeah.
Are our cravings actually dictated by our microbiome? And if so, how do we change our microbiome to want healthy foods as opposed to junk foods?
I love this question. So there's actually quite good evidence that our gut microbiome composition does influence our food choices. And this makes sense. If we think about gut microbes as beings that want to evolve and survive, it's important that they're able to send messages to us, to our brain, to eat foods that help them thrive. Now, if we don't have a diet rich in fiber and different plants, and we have, for example, a high fat, high animal protein diet, the gut microbes that like eating those foods will thrive, because there are gut microbes that love to break down animal fat, for example. So you can imagine that if we don't nourish the gut microbes that love fiber and love veggies, they tend to die out, and they're replaced by the gut microbes that love whatever food you are eating. And so when those guys take over, they want to survive. So they will send messages through the vagus nerve up to your brain to essentially, they will dictate your food choice. Not 100%, but they have quite a big influence. A lot of these studies are done in mice, and you can see how you can really influence mouse food behavior by changing the gut microbiome. So how can we help ourselves by helping our gut microbes? Well, you need to be feeding the good guys. So the microbes that love the fruit and vegetables, that love the legumes, that love the nuts, the more you feed them, the more they'll grow, the more they can replicate. And when they start crowding out the microbes that love the fast food, then you'll find yourself gravitating towards those foods more. And it's in part because of your gut microbiome, but it's also in part because you'll feel better. You'll have better energy, your mental clarity will be improved, and your inflammation will go down. So generally speaking, when people switch from a very low fiber, low plant diet to a high fiber, high plant diet, they actually feel the benefits so much that they will stick with that. And in part, it's thanks to the gut microbes.
You're Italian originally.
Yeah.
And you grew up there for 7 years or so?
That's right, yeah.
And so now this is where you are on the chart, on the map?
Yeah, there we are.
So
just above Spain.
You're in third place.
Fourth, right? Japan, France, Spain just beats us, look.
Well, what I mean is, we're in first place, the United States. You're not going to catch us.
You win the prize for that. Yeah.
And you lost your crown to Australia for second place.
That's right.
So you're bronze medalist now for obesity.
United Kingdom, that's us, third place, you're right. That's impressive.
I know Tim Spector is an epidemiologist. I don't want him to roll in his or get upset about my statement now, but doesn't it look like speaking the English language is causal of obesity?
It definitely does look like that, yeah. Exactly that. It must be the English language.
Is that because in America we spread so much misinformation and it's easily transmitted to Australia and England?
It travels across the language barrier. Yeah, there is
and
none.
our food, our prepackaged industrialized food.
Yeah, so that's, it's interesting because those three countries do have the highest consumption of industrialized, high energy density.
And they're obsessed with protein.
Highly processed
powders
food.
And bars.
Yeah, powders and bars, shakes.
And big pieces of protein in the center of the plate that are high calorie. And
exactly. So like that traditional like meat and then 2 veg as the plate.
Yeah, that's Australia. Except I think they're 3 veg.
Oh, what's the third one?
I don't remember.
Potato, carrot, and peas. Yeah, so that's very traditional in the UK as well.
Oh, really?
That is, that's like a traditional meal, is meat and 2 veg.
So how did Spain and France bend their obesity curves down?
It's a really good question, and I find this fascinating. There's a few factors for Spain and France, right, that have come together to show this slowing. And I think it's interesting that also they weren't quite on the same incline. Mm-hmm. So they've just kind of kept it steady. Yeah. And of course, food culture is a big part of that. Mm-hmm. They have a strong food culture. There is a strong sort of tradition of preparing fresh foods, cooking together and sharing meals.
France takes their school lunch very seriously. In fact, students get between 1 and 1.5 hours just for lunch. Wow. First course is a shredded carrot salad. This is so fancy.
Almost too fancy.
Really fresh.
10 times healthier than any school lunch I've ever had in America.
And the rules, by the way, for school lunch in France are very strict. No soda, no candy, no vending machines on campus at all. All the food is cooked from scratch by chefs, and no more than 4 times a month can you have any fried food.
That is impressive.
Now for dessert, a piece of fruit.
Presentation on point.
I know a piece of fruit might seem like such a lame dessert, but for me, it's actually perfect. We wash it down with a little water.
So what we see with the slowing with Spain and France is that they have had newer legislation brought in to reduce the marketing of some of the worst kind of processed foods.
American food.
Yeah, basically, American food. And also there's been a marked shift in women's diets and older people. So those two groups have really seen that curve change. And also it's really important to say that in those countries, there's less of a huge gap between different incomes. So income groups in the US, the poorest households are like really driving that upward trend in obesity, whereas there's less disparity within those countries when it comes to access to healthy food. So in Spain, in France, and in Italy, but let's focus on the guys that are doing better. In Spain and France, it's easier to access healthy foods, even if you're on a lower income. And it's also easier to move. So you can walk on the streets, there's better public transportation for lower income households. And that's a big driver. So it's a multifactorial picture, as always with obesity. But it's really, it works. If you actually have all those factors coming together, then you do need some intervention from the government. You need to put in place marketing, like rails, basically guardrails, and you need to be able to give people access to healthy food, which is a huge problem in the UK and the US. So, but it's possible, hey? We could do it.
Yeah, I also read that they teach nutrition in schools. And they have a big program in France, Spain, and Japan.
Yeah.
I did a whole episode on the Japanese school lunch program.
It's amazing, the Japanese one,
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah. It's inspirational, actually.
Yeah, so astonishing. And some of the Japanese women who've gone to other countries to help them start their education program. I was on a Zoom with Canada and a couple other countries, and a couple of these women who help organize the Japanese school program said America's the hardest place to do it.
Most of the Japanese people, when they heard the word food education, shokuiku, they think, oh, that's important. The school should teach about food at school. Nobody resists about that. But I think outside of Japan, like in the US, more like food is something more like, private, family, it's going to take care of it. So I've seen the big gap in Japan and here in the US, how, people think about like food, education, especially at schools.
Oh, really?
It's just an American culture thing because we have all these different ideas, obsessions about diet.
So parents don't actually want the intervention from the school side?
They do not.
That's really interesting. I didn't know that. I think it's a fundamental part of education. That United Kingdom doesn't teach anymore in schools. There isn't like a program that means all children are taught about school food. It was replaced by subjects that were deemed to be more important But I think there needs to be an interest at sort of government level to understand what an important tool this is to prevent disease in these generations, but also to give them the tools to be able to look after themselves and their families better. Because I think it was Jamie Oliver who identified years ago that in the US, certain families are like 4th generation without cooking skills. So we're no longer learning from our grandmothers, our aunties. So there needs to be a re-injection of food education, nutrition education, at schools, so that that cycle can start again, and then really encourage people to pass these skills on to their children and to their families and friends. It's a really sad picture when you think about how disempowered people feel. They don't feel like they know how to cook a healthy meal, and that's really disempowering, especially if you're a parent. Like, you don't have the agency to cook something that's going to nurture your child. And I think, Chris, this is where we see a lot of disengagement from nutrition science with the population, because if you feel like you can't access the healthy food that you're told is good for your child, and all you can access is the like ready packets of mac and cheese and the sausages
or
and the
protein drinks for kids.
Yeah, well, if that's what's available to you, then as a parent you're like, well, I can't even get to these foods that people tell me are good for my child, and if I did, I don't know how to prepare them, and that is taking my power away as a parent.
And you probably
People
don't even know what's good
that.
for you.
Yeah, and that
because now
angry.
Here in America, saturated fat is back.
Is that official?
No, but it's being hinted at. But it's kind of official for frying French fries, right?
Yes, which is, I've been shocked by that, to be honest. Like the fact that
isn't the whole world shocked?
Yeah, well, I think so. I do actually worry about what that effect will be in like 10 years' time, because the amount of people that will suddenly be consuming a much higher amount of saturated fat again. We know that's going to cause problems. Yeah.
This is not a scientific question.
No.
There's no uncertainty there, as far as I can tell.
And I don't really understand the political driver for that, other than to be controversial.
Well, I think the influencers have taken over.
Yeah, there was actually that CDC survey where they found 60% of adults get their medical and health information online now, which is huge.
And when you consider who's exposed online, where the big views are, it's not nutrition scientists.
No, there isn't one of us.
Yeah.
It's like, what happened? We really need to work on building our platforms, because it's...
Well, you guys are doing a good job.
Yeah,
at Zoe.
We are at Zoe. It is hard work, especially when you're careful about putting out information that is accurate and that is relevant to everyone listening, because I think oftentimes information is put out online as like a general message. You don't know who views your stuff. You don't know who's watching. So if you're putting advice or information online, it needs to be pretty relevant to the majority of the population. And to do that in a responsible way, it takes time, it takes preparation, it takes thought. There's now this narrative, like the Nova classification, ultra-processed foods, created 15 years ago, amazing epidemiological tool. It gave us the ability to understand how the food system was changing and how the food environment has changed in terms of what's available. What it was never designed to do is understand the health outcomes of the food, right? So level of processing does not equate health outcome. It's not the same thing. Now, of course, there's been dozens of studies that have looked at, well, does level of processing equal health outcome? And what you have seen, and we've all seen, is like on the whole, people who have the highest consumption of ultra-processed foods have worse health outcomes. It's a poor dietary pattern. But when you start looking at comparing the types of ultra-processed foods, some of them can be a helpful part of the diet to prevent things like heart disease or type 2 diabetes. So this is exactly why Zoe, we were like, how do we help with this? Because people started fearing the ultra-processed food, and what are they eating instead, right? If you're swapping the Impossible ground beef or the corn with the ground beef, it's not good for you. So the health outcome is not better. And we created the risk scale for processed foods exactly for this.
It's not good for you to eat the beef as opposed to the Impossible.
Yeah, it's not. You're not doing yourself a favor because it's less processed.
Right.
So the risk scale, which is in the app, which is, you've seen that, is designed as a scientific tool to understand how features of processing are actually impacting health outcomes. I see. And it's a big difference, because when you process something for it to be beneficial, so perhaps you are made of bread and you've added extra fiber to it and you've added extra seeds to it, you've processed that bread and you've made it better as a food. There's more steps in the processing. It's a UPF, but it's actually better to eat that than to eat the alternative. We have to move beyond UPF and start looking at like, what is the actual risk of this? Because the amount of people that are now switching back to cow's milk because they're worried that their fortified soy milk is a UPF.
Yeah, that's crazy.
For health outcomes, you're not doing yourself a service actually, and let alone planetary health, right? So that's a really important narrative. I am, and like you, I'm of the mindset that I don't eat red meat, but I don't try to replace it with red meat products. It's just like, I don't want to do that. I don't want a fake steak, and I don't eat fake mince. But we really need to start thinking about less about fear of processing.
And by mince, you mean mince meat?
Yeah, ground beef. Yeah, that's what I mean.
I was thinking mince. They're pretty good, actually. Add a little mint flavor to chocolate.
No, sorry, ground beef. So we have to really be careful with what we're swapping for what, and especially if we're just obsessed with processing as the devil for everything. I am the first person to tell people to eat more whole foods, and I think any nutritionist, anyone in public health will say, try and make the majority of your diet whole food diet.
That's everyone in public health?
I'd hope so.
You'd hope so? Because Peter Attia and Andrew Huberman,
they don't work in public health, Chris.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
But they write books. Well, at least Attia wrote a book on longevity.
He did, yeah. But it's like, there's a difference, right? It's like...
That is about as ultra-processed. He's the chief scientific officer for this.
And that not only is that the most ultra-processed thing you've ever got, there is nothing about the processing in that makes it healthy. What makes that healthy?
The protein. You got to have protein.
You don't need, like, protein as by itself.
Super ultra-processed bar.
It's terrible, that bar. And I don't believe anything about the fat thing. Like, it doesn't work like that.
Erica Sonnenberg, we were in a meeting with her yesterday, and she almost screamed when we mentioned that fat, because she said it's just so destructive to the microbiome.
I bet.
Alestra was the predecessor to it.
Yeah.
But if this one it's a little more saturated, the fat is a little more saturated.
Oh, good.
Do you know the reason for that?
No, I don't.
It has a higher melting point.
Okay.
So less anal leakage.
Oh, good.
I'm sorry to wake you up with that.
I knew that Alestra causes that anal leakage.
Yeah.
So they've saturated it further to try and so people don't get the squits when they eat it, basically.
Yeah.
Cool.
So a good positioning statement for this, good marketing might be less anal leakage. How much protein? Because our 3 English-speaking countries are obsessed with protein.
Yes.
And it's in everything. We're fortifying Wheaties now with protein.
Popcorn, water.
Popcorn, really?
Have you not seen Khloe Kardashian's popcorn brand?
No, I haven't.
It is a protein popcorn.
And there's protein water? Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
How do they add protein to water?
I don't know. Good. We should ask them. Well, I think they just literally add BCAAs. They add branched chain amino acids to it.
Michelle interviewed nutrition scientists who come up with the dietary guidelines for different countries.
Yes.
For the Nordic countries, the 5 Nordic countries combined with the same scientists, 212 scientists or something like that, including epidemiologists and everyone else. Switzerland, Japan, Canada. I know you promote the Canadian food guide.
Yeah.
Japan, Switzerland, and the Nordic countries all place a cap on protein consumption at 20% of calories.
Yes.
And for children, 15% of calories.
Yes.
Don't go above 15% for children. Can you comment on what, it seems like with the carnivore diet, you're getting more than 20%.
Oh, yeah. So the 20% cap is really smart because all of the epidemiological data shows that when you go above that, you start to see increased risk, especially in cancers. I mean, Professor Valtalongo has done a lot of work on that percentage.
Yeah, we interviewed him.
So I think it's very smart. And also the way, if we pivot to thinking about it as percentage of, then you start to think about, okay, what else should be on your plate?
I like it so much better that way than grams. Because then when you're an athlete and you're eating 6,000 calories,
it still makes sense.
It still makes sense. When you have an off week or something like that, how do you calculate all these grams and everything?
But to your point, I think it's also hard to calculate percent. Like, it's still hard. I couldn't do it in my head. Like the percent of carbs.
The thing that I think is interesting is I've studied 114 food guides. Those are the ones I could identify.
Yeah.
And they all arrive in the same place because the epidemiology is so clear.
It's so clear, yeah.
And it's all some derivative of the Mediterranean diet.
Yes, exactly.
And, there's different cultural tastes and things, but the principles are the same. If you eat that diet, you don't exceed 20% of protein. You end up what, 15, 16,
Yeah,
17%?
16. So what we found in our Zoe trials as well is that when people follow the dietary advice that we give them, they sit between 16, 17%.
That's about right.
And this is the trials that we've done which show improvement in mood, energy, waist circumference, all the kind of, a lot of markers of cardiometabolic health, but also self-reported markers of like, actually I feel good, which is important to remember. I think that when it comes to like grams per kilogram, whatever, people love to focus on this. I think that what I find very frustrating, and I've done a lot of work with media on this, is this idea that we have to completely ignore the established guidelines, that they're completely wrong, that they've been miscalculated.
Is that a thing in the UK too?
Mm-hmm. Well, it
because
is.
When we were interviewing these other countries like Norway, she said that 70% of Norwegians have trust in the guidelines.
This is the point. This is such an important point.
In the US, it's like 4%.
In the UK, less than 1% adhere to the...
Adhere, but how many trust it?
The trust is below 40%. It's low, but it depends on which survey you look at. And I think it's actually got worse since the pandemic. Wow. So there's very low adherence and there's low trust. And the countries that have higher trust don't have the same issue with being influenced by social media influencers who have no place in public health, have no training in it, and also don't really... all the ones I'm thinking of in my head right now have no formal nutrition education either.
And they're so into, well, your research is influenced by corporate finance and so on. And that can be, and it's a concern. But they're getting so rich promoting supplements
100%.
And athletic greens and everything else.
Do you know what I discovered the other day was that the fastest growing food in the US like last month or something was these beef jerky sticks you guys have?
It's Peter Attia.
So this is...
He invested in a company that does...
a processed meat stick.
Yeah.
That's insane, right?
And deer jerky. So he promotes deer jerky. Right. It has twice the heme iron percentage of beef.
We've talked about heme iron's role in...
Yeah. And so if you want to double your heme iron...
What you also touched on is this idea that there is like a protein pyramid.
Yeah.
And I think it's helpful for people to think about, because the dietary pyramids are really useful tools. And the Mediterranean diet, I think if someone hasn't seen it, you can Google it. And it just shows you this distribution of the quantities of food, right? And within it, so it's this protein pyramid. It's clear across all the different evidence bases, but also across different cuisines and places in the world. So the healthiest protein comes from plants. Mm-hmm. So we should over-index on protein from legumes, from nuts and seeds. And something we haven't touched on today, we probably don't have time, but it's really interesting, is amino acid balance. Mm-hmm. So we know that all plants contain all the amino acids, including the essential ones. But there's actually some really fascinating research looking at how different amino acid intakes can influence obesogenic pathways. Mm-hmm. So there's a group in Denmark who did a trial that found that if you control, they gave everyone a vegan diet to remove any sort of doubt of is it animal or plant, and they just tweaked the amino acid balance. The populations that had the lower branch chain amino acid intake, especially the sulfur containing amino acids, and these patients who are obese saw a 20% greater weight loss, reduction in weight loss, reduced inflammatory markers. So there is something much more interesting to me than just total protein, is actually which amino acids are you eating more of. That is where the science is moving. Whereas actually what we need to help people do is eat more of the amino acids that are promoting health. And
you sound like Walter Longo.
There is no surprise to you. I haven't met him, but there is no surprise to you that...
We interviewed him, it was fascinating, and the interview's doing really well.
Really well.
He thinks that it's the amino acid profile that's the most important thing. So if you're eating amino acids like methionine that have a lot of sulfur component, then there's all kinds of negative outcomes.
And you see the circulating
they're concentrated in animal products.
Yes, exactly. So I was going to say, there's no surprise that the healthy amino acid profiles come from plants. So protein pyramid, just eat lots of plant proteins. You don't have to think about it. Just add some whole grains, some legumes, some nuts and seeds to your day. You're doing a really good job. If you like soy products, great, have those too. Then the next level up is interesting, and it's really fermented dairy.
Yeah.
So fermented dairy, it's
Yogurt.
terrible for the environment. But in terms of health impact, kefir, natural yogurt, traditional made cheeses have health promoting effects in the diet. So if you want to help your child have a healthy diet, like great to feed them nuts and seeds and legumes and get them used to whole grains and stuff. And then let them have some cheese, get them used to natural yogurt. One of the best flexes for early childhood, unsweetened natural yogurt for your children. If you start them on flavored, sweetened yogurts, it's very hard for them to then choose the natural yogurt. Give them kefir. Then the next level up is oily fish. So of all the animal proteins from flesh, oily fish have a role to play. Omega-3 fatty acids are an issue. There is like a deficiency actually across populations in DHA and EPA. So if you're going to have some oily fish 2 or 3 times a week, try and choose more sustainable options if you can. Then above that is eggs, right? We haven't touched animals.
Sardines are most sustainable, yeah.
Sardines are most sustainable, great. Then we've got eggs. But again, I think people often think eggs are innocuous, and there's lots of influencers that recommend eating like 6 eggs a day. Yeah. And the choline in the eggs, by the way, choline is another pathway that's implicated with when it's metabolized in the gut. One of the products is carcinogenic and also contained in meat. So eggs are great. I eat eggs. They're really good for children as well. They're a great food, but not 8 a day, not 6 a day, not even every day. And then above that you get poultry, like we're getting right to the top of the pyramid. Then above that you have red meat, and then off the pyramid is processed meat. It's not even on the pyramid, because whilst I still believe that people can have a long and healthy life with red meat consumption, maybe once or twice a month, I think it's possible.
Sure.
With that dietary pattern though, with the Mediterranean diet supporting it, processed meat is doing no one any favors ever. Like, it's not a thing to include. But I think if you start to think about protein in that way, then it helps us to engage with like how we'll be getting plenty. Protein deficiency is not a thing.
Yeah, I know.
96% of us are fiber deficient.
Yeah. Like
deficient. 40% of females who are menstruating are likely to be iron insufficient, right? Omega-3, DHAs, EPAs are a problem. No one is protein deficient unless they're hospitalized, they're very sick people, like with cancer. So what are we doing?
They're old and they lost their teeth and they're not eating enough.
Yeah, and they're eating the highly processed foods that are really soft, that are completely nutrient devoid. Yeah. And that's again going back to like public health. How do we support the vulnerable people that have this issue? And how do we make sure that every single corner store and store has access to nutritious food as well as crap?
You're amazing. I could talk to you for 3 hours, but we got to get to the conference.
Pop-Tarts and Doritos bulking up with added protein.
Move over, crack. There's a new epidemic in town. Do you people really think you can get healthy by eating protein Doritos?